It started like any ordinary evening. I was sprawled across my small apartment sofa, scrolling through my phone, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. With a sigh, I set my phone aside and opened the door. Standing there was Ethan, my colleague, and someone I'd casually known for months, but never really spent time with outside of work. His hair was slightly messy, his blazer creased as if he had rushed from some last-minute meeting. In one hand, he held his phone, and in the other, a tangled mess of charger cables. "Hey, I know this sounds weird, but my charger just died," he said, a sheepish grin spreading across his face. "Can I borrow yours for a bit?" I blinked, caught off guard by a sudden visit. I'd never had anyone show up at my apartment unannounced, much less someone who always seemed so composed at work. But there was something in his tone that made it hard to say no. I stepped aside, gesturing for him to come in. "Of course. It's just over there," I replied, pointing toward the power strip by the couch. Ethan moved closer, crouching slightly as he untangled his devices. The room smelled faintly of coffee and the subtle scent of his cologne, which made my stomach do something unfamiliar. I told myself it was nothing, just a reaction to the sudden proximity of someone I knew. Yet, I couldn't help but notice the way he paused as he plugged in his phone, his fingers brushing mine for a brief, electric moment. We ended up sitting awkwardly on the couch, talking about trivial things. Work deadlines, mutual acquaintances, the weather, yet there was an unspoken tension that pulsed between us. Ethan laughed at a joke I didn't think was particularly funny, and I realized my chest tightened in ways it shouldn't. There was a magnetic energy, a subtle pull I tried to rationalize as coincidence or just familiarity. After a few minutes, Ethan's hand lingered near mine on the armrest. I told myself I was imagining it, but then he shifted closer, his leg brushing mine. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, and I noticed the soft, nervous way he avoided direct eye contact, almost as if he were afraid to admit what was building between us. The charger had long since been forgotten. It was now an excuse, a pretense to remain close. "Can I be honest?" he said suddenly, his voice dropping a notch. I nodded, though my throat had gone dry. I didn't just come for the charger," he confessed, eyes searching mine. "I've been thinking about you more than I should. I know it's wrong, but I can't help it." Every nerve in my body went on alert. I felt guilty for the rapid pulse of excitement that surged through me, guilt for even enjoying the idea that someone like Ethan, someone unattainable, forbidden, was admitting attraction to me. My mind raced. I was in a relationship, a steady, predictable, loving partnership with Liam, who trusted me in ways I could never betray lightly. And yet, the raw intensity of the moment made me question boundaries I had never imagined crossing. Ethan shifted again closer, and I felt the heat of him pressing against me. I told myself to resist, to maintain reason, but the magnetic pull was undeniable. He leaned in slightly, a whisper away from my ear, and my resolve faltered. I wanted to step back, to remind myself of loyalty and commitment, but instead, I froze, caught between desire and conscience. "You feel it too," Ethan said softly, almost a statement, almost a question. His hand brushed mine again, this time lingering longer, holding the weight of what neither of us had admitted aloud. My heartbeat thudded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. The tension in the room was palpable. Even the muted hum of the city outside felt like a soundtrack to our silent battle. I realized then that this visit, this innocent excuse about a charger, had become something far more dangerous. Something intimate and forbidden had crept into the space between us. We were no longer colleagues. We were two people teetering on the edge of a boundary we weren't supposed to cross, and yet the pull was intoxicating. Every laugh, every touch, every glance felt like a spark threatening to ignite a fire we couldn't contain. The room seemed smaller, charged with energy. Ethan's eyes held mine, searching for permission, for acknowledgement, for something neither of us dared say aloud. And in that quiet, tension-filled moment, I understood that the simple act of lending a charger had unlocked something far more potent. A dangerous, alluring curiosity, one that would challenge loyalty, test desire, and blur the lines of everything I thought I knew about myself. By the time Ethan finally stood to leave, the charger long forgotten My hands trembled slightly. I told myself it was nerves, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. Something had shifted subtly yet irrevocably, and I wasn't sure how, or if I would ever return to the person I was before that night. The days after Ethan's unexpected visit felt strangely disorienting. I went about my routine, met deadlines at work, and laughed with friends. But the memory of that evening lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, not from Liam's messages, but from a faint, thrilling possibility it might be Ethan. I scolded myself silently for thinking of him, for the little sparks of anticipation that danced in my chest whenever I recalled his close proximity, the way his fingers had brushed mine. It was a dangerous thrill, one that should have repelled me, but instead it drew me in. I tried to focus on Liam, on the steady rhythm of our relationship, but even that began to feel muted. Liam was predictable, safe, and loving, but in a way that was almost background noise compared to the electricity I felt around Ethan. I realized that I was measuring our interactions now, comparing, analyzing, and craving something more visceral, more immediate. Each laugh, each glance with Ethan in the office or during casual encounters sent a rush through me, a quiet craving I refused to acknowledge openly. One evening, after work, I stayed late at the office, pretending to wrap up reports. My phone buzzed. Ethan. The message was casual, almost innocent. Forgot my charger again. Mind if I come by? My chest tightened. I told myself this was a mistake, that I should ignore him, but the thought of seeing him again made my pulse race. The curiosity, the tension, the unspoken connection pulled me toward a decision I knew I shouldn't make. I replied simply, "Sure, come up." When Ethan arrived, the familiar scent hit me first, a mix of coffee and something uniquely him. His presence immediately filled the apartment, erasing all pretense of professionalism or restraint. We sat together again on the couch, and this time, neither of us mentioned the charger. It was a subtle acknowledgement of the truth we both knew, but were unwilling to say aloud. This wasn't about borrowing a device. It was about proximity, intimacy, and testing boundaries. Our conversation flowed more easily this time, filled with shared laughter and lingering glances. Ethan leaned slightly closer, and I felt the warmth of his body seeping into mine. My rational mind screamed for me to stop, to retreat, to call Liam and remind myself of my commitments. But my body betrayed me, leaning just enough into the forbidden closeness. Every touch, every accidental brush of skin, every glance felt magnified, as if the universe had contracted to just the two of us in that small apartment. "I know this is complicated," Ethan said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "I shouldn't feel this way, but I do. And I can't stop thinking about you." His hand found mine again, fingers intertwining naturally. The shock of the gesture sent a jolt through me, a mixture of guilt and longing. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, a rapid drumbeat reminding me of the impossibility of the situation. "You're dangerous," I whispered, half laughing, half nervous. "You have no idea what you're doing to me." "I think I do," he replied with a sly smile, the kind that made my stomach flip. "But I also think you want it too, even if you won't admit it." The truth was undeniable. I wanted it. I wanted him. And yet, beneath the thrill was a gnawing sense of betrayal that clawed at my conscience. Every rational thought screamed in warning, but the pull of desire, the intoxication of intimacy, was stronger. Ethan leaned closer, and the proximity was suffocating in its intensity. I could feel the tension coiling between us, ready to snap at any moment. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, words unnecessary, tension filling the air. Each glance and subtle touch was loaded with meaning, a silent conversation of desire and restraint. I was acutely aware of my own hands, my racing heartbeat, the tremor in my voice whenever he spoke. The apartment, normally a place of comfort, now felt charged, a private arena where two hearts teetered dangerously close to crossing a line they shouldn't. Finally, Ethan stood, ostensibly to leave, but lingered at the door. Our eyes met, and in that suspended moment, every thought, every hesitation, every boundary blurred. He didn't kiss me. He didn't confess anything further. But the unspoken promise hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. As the door closed behind him, I leaned against it, exhaling shakily. I was exhilarated, terrified, and ashamed all at once. I knew, without question, that something had shifted irrevocably. The borrowed charger had become a catalyst, igniting a dangerous curiosity, a temptation I could no longer ignore. Every rational thought about loyalty and commitment was now in direct conflict when Irresistible pulled toward Ethan. That night, lie awake next to Liam, I felt a growing distance, a tension between the safety of love and the thrill of forbidden attraction. I didn't know how far I could go or how much I could resist, but I knew one thing. Nothing would ever feel the same again. The days that followed were a torment of secrecy and stolen moments. At work, Ethan and I exchanged glances that carried meaning no one else could decipher. A hand brush along a shared desk, a lingering look over the rim of a coffee cup. Each small gesture was charged with forbidden electricity. The thrill of being near him was intoxicating. Yet every interaction left me racked with guilt. I would leave the office, pretending to be cheerful, while my mind replayed our moments together, twisting desire and conscience into a knot I couldn't untangle. Liam, oblivious of the storm brewing in my heart, continued with our routine. He sent messages, made dinner plans, spoke of a weekend getaway, and I felt a pang of shame every time I smiled at him. I loved Liam, I did, but loving him now felt like holding a book whose pages had been scorched by fire. The warmth was still there, but a part of me had shifted irrevocably toward another flame. Every choice I made now felt like betrayal. Yet the pull of Ethan was a force I could neither ignore nor resist. One evening, Ethan knocked again. I hesitated at the door, my heart hammering. When I opened it, his presence filled the space, as if he had always belonged there. There was no pretense this time, no talk of chargers, no casual conversation. He stepped inside with an intensity that made the room feel smaller, the air thick with unspoken promises. Our eyes locked, and I felt that same magnetic pull, stronger than ever, as if the seconds we had spent apart had only intensified the inevitable. "I can't stop thinking about you," he whispered, close enough that his breath brushed my ear. "I've tried to resist, but every time I see you, I want more." His hand found mine, fingers entwining naturally, and the warmth of his touch made me shiver. I knew what this meant. Crossing the line was no longer a question. It was imminent. The desire between us was palpable, and the tension had reached a point where restraint felt impossible. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed. My loyalty to Liam warred with the raw need that Ethan evoked. I tried to speak, tried to form a sentence that would justify holding back. But my voice faltered. My body betrayed me. Leaning into his, drawn by the inevitability of what we both wanted. Every nerve in my body was alert. Every heartbeat a drum signaling surrender. We moved closer, a collision of emotions and suppressed longing. The room seemed to contract, leaving only the two of us suspended in a private reality. There was no overt declaration, no kiss yet, just a brush of skin, the shared heat of proximity, the intensity of forbidden connection that had grown too powerful to deny. The danger of our actions made the moment sweeter, the risk amplifying every sensation. For hours, we remained locked in that delicate tension, words unnecessary, gestures heavy with meaning. Every sigh, every shift in posture, every glance was a conversation, a confession, a temptation. I was acutely aware of the line we were about to cross, and yet part of me welcomed it. It was thrilling, terrifying, and impossible to resist. Finally, Ethan pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine. "I don't want to ruin everything, but I can't stop myself," he admitted, his voice raw with honesty. I nodded, knowing I felt the same. There was no judgment, no accusation, only the recognition of a shared need that defied logic and morality. We both understood the consequences, but in that suspended space, they felt distant, almost irrelevant. When he left that night, the apartment felt hollow, charged with the memory of his presence. I sat in silence, grappling with guilt, desire, and the realization that nothing could remain the same. I had crossed an invisible threshold, not yet in action, but in thought and emotion, and the consequences would ripple through my life whether I acted or restrained myself. That night, lying next to Liam, I felt a disconnect I couldn't ignore. My mind replayed Ethan's touch, his words, the intensity of his gaze, and I realized I was at a crossroads. Loyalty and passion, love and desire, were in direct conflict. I knew choices had to be made, but the path forward was murky, shadowed by temptation and the thrill of forbidden intimacy. I didn't know if I would succumb fully or resist, but one thing was certain. My life, my relationships, and my understanding of myself had shifted irreversibly. Ethan had come for a charger, but he had plugged into something far deeper, into a part of me I didn't fully understand, into desires I kept hidden, into a vulnerability I could no longer deny. The consequences of that connection, of that spark, loomed over me like a storm on the horizon, inevitable and unstoppable. And as I closed my eyes, trying to sleep, I understood the truth. Some fires, once ignited, cannot be extinguished, and the tension between desire and loyalty would define every choice I made from that moment forward.